Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Party of Two podcast, crashing into your podcast feed like too soon. I'm one of your hosts, the Internet's Mark B. Donica.
And I'm your other host, the Internet's Andrea Donica.
Man, we were going to talk about some other stuff, and we finally went on the Skyway this past weekend, and it was such a lovely time. And then, what's on our timelines? What's in the news? Oh my God. We're going to talk about that, as well as some other forms of Disney World transport in review. But Andrea, I've been coming home the past couple of days from work, and you've got your headphones in, and you're listening seemingly eagerly. Get it? It's like eagerly but different to the Bob Iger book, and I wanted to how is it?
It's really good. And I mean, I've been seeing other Disney fans on just Twitter, etc., and some publications picking up excerpts here and there, trying to analyze things. And granted, they went further on into the book than I've gotten yet. But
do you know how far? How many chapters? I know it's an audiobook, but how far chapter wise?
I would say,
or how long?
I am
you've been
3
listening?
hours and 40. No, I have 3 hours and 40 minutes left.
Out of how long total? Do you know? How long in are you?
If I press the button, everything's going to be ruined.
Okay, but where's the marker?
Oh, I'm a little over halfway through the book. So yeah, it's really, really good, and I like audiobooks. I've been obviously doing podcasting and stuff now, leaning more towards this audio genre is just kind of now more in my wheelhouse, but I really liked the idea that I could at least hear Bob Iger do some of the narrative.
Oh, really?
He actually does the prologue. And
just the prologue?
Just the prologue, unfortunately. Look, he's a very busy man.
Oh, what else has he got going on?
But just the prologue itself just brought me right in. I was like, whoa. Basically, he goes through his the worst day of him working at the Disney company.
Wow.
And, or I would say kind of weeks. It was just kind of a culmination of a lot of bad things that happened, but I don't...
His worst time at the Walt Disney Company.
Yeah, and at the same time, like, he's also going through, there's all this other great stuff that's going on, but I have to keep, a brave face through all of this and through all of the press stuff, and it's just, it automatically brought so much humanity to him. Being a huge CEO, arguably maybe the biggest CEO just alive right now.
I'd say CEO of one of the most powerful companies in the world.
Right.
Or I would even say public companies, because there's a lot of companies where we don't know who's at or rather we have the name, but they're not as in public as Bob Iger is.
Right. He can seem... He's very good at staying very mellow and even keel. And per se, to some people that might read as cold, he has so much humanity in this book. And I have grown to have so much more of an appreciation for all of the stuff that he's been through, had to deal with, and his innovation and his tenacity.
Well, it sounds like what we've been talking about Bob Chapek recently, where it's you take away the company bylines and you listen to the man. Let's listen to the man, and that's where you get the humanity back.
Yeah,
and I know he's busy, but I wish hopefully they do a revised edition of the audiobook, which will get people to buy it a second time.
If he ever actually retires.
I hope so.
I mean, he's probably still going to be a board member on a couple of different organizations. It's really interesting reading all of this corporate stuff that I really didn't have any knowledge or understanding of before. And also, before I went into this audiobook, I finished Disney War, finally, which was really insightful. And now also hearing because Bob Iger was in that book, and Bob actually makes it a point of like, hey, they didn't get everything right.
Oh, that's
Not
great.
going to necessarily address every single thing, because then the book would probably be 5 times as long.
It's a clap book.
But it's really interesting just reading all of the political stuff that these people have to deal with, and just all of these wild things. It's funny to me when some Disney fans, especially park fans, and obviously we are huge park fans, some people are like, oh, Disney bought Fox so that they could put Fox characters into the parks. And I immediately laughed and I said, you think that that's why they bought Fox? Oh, child.
Nobody thinks about all facets of the company. And I find something similar with Sony, where some people think of them as solely a games developer, manufacturer, all that sort of stuff, when they have, or just a movie studio,
right,
or just an electronics manufacturer. But you got to think of that across all platforms, and how much access they have to promote a particular product, whether it be in any of those divisions, across all of the other divisions. It's remarkable, like the promotion that they did for last year. Wow, it's been a year. Last year's Spider-Man game, which is a PlayStation exclusive, they had that Peter Parker suit in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse just in the background, and then people freak out. They had custom electronics. They had all sorts of a media blitz for this thing that hit a variety of facets, and it's entirely possible that it's possible that will show up in even more avenues now that it is a proven success. I mean, Spider-Man is a proven successful, but that particular Spider-Man story, it's already going to get a sequel, but what else will it get now that it is proven successful? And by Disney buying these proven successful things, they don't have to stick to a particular thing. They can keep things the way that they are. People have been talking about it since the purchase, but what's going to happen to the Simpsons ride at Universal? They might just license it out more.
Probably.
Who
I mean,
knows?
that's essentially what they're doing with the costumes for the Simpsons characters in the parks right now, actually. So Disney owns those costumes, which is why we saw them at D23. So Disney has full license for that, which is wild. So Universal is actually renting out those costumes now to Disney. It's not on the same agreement and contract with the rides and lands that have already been built. There are all of these crazy layers and all of these individual stipulations. It's just wild.
And if everybody's making money and everybody's happy with it, like sort of what we saw, but the opposite of the Sony thing with Marvel, if Fox is like, oh cool, yeah, great. I mean, Fox is already they're making their money.
Oh, sure.
And they're also spending their money, but they're making this money, and you got to keep that stuff going. And even though they're just sort of sports and news now, they've got to keep that going somehow. And if they can somehow keep or Universal is NBC, and that's an additional layer, blah blah blah. But ultimately, it's stuff where are people really conflating Simpsons as a Disney property? Like, the closest thing that
people are trying to.
The closest thing that it got was either Lisa or Marge in the Simpsons game was represented as like a Disney princess, as sort of, but as like a parody. But this was years ago.
I'm rolling my eyes since you can't see my face.
But it's one of the,
it's like saying, oh, Disney bought this property and this movie. Oh, it's Rocky Horror Picture Show. Oh, so. Frankenfurter is a Disney princess.
Disney princess.
Oh my god.
That is a canon I can get behind.
It's funny. Don't get me wrong. It's funny. But y'all need to just settle down, because Disney is owning everything. If Universal NBC hasn't gotten it, Disney's going for it. It is these two massive companies that are constantly trying to one-up each other. This is the battle of wills.
And I'm sure Disney War kind of gives you a bigger glimpse into that. And now with the personalization of the Bob Iger book, we get a little bit more of him, and probably a little insight into why he did certain things. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And again, the humanity there, just, his wants, his hopes, his dreams, his ideas, very inspiring. And at the same time, also having to be that guy where it's like, well, I don't, I want to keep my job, especially for the years that he was working with Eisner, weren't easy for him. And people automatically came down on him as, oh, well, he was chosen, handpicked by Eisner. So how is he going to actually make any big changes? This is not what we wanted when Save Disney was put forth, etc., etc. And that's not necessarily a fair assumption to make either. I highly recommend picking up this book or audiobook. I mean, just hearing him narrate the prologue is really fantastic. It's called The Ride of a Lifetime. Lessons learned from 15 years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company by Bob Iger. And yeah, it's a mouthful of a title, but Disney's been known to do that recently.
How are you listening to it? Is that Audible?
Yeah.
Okay. So audible.com, I'm sure there are other platforms as well, Apple Books.
Absolutely. But I've been listening to it while I've been working out and just kind of doing different things. Highly recommend it. And if you haven't read Disney War, I really recommend reading that first to give even more context to everything.
And who's the author?
Disney War was written by...
It's right up there.
James B. Stewart.
There you go.
Yeah.
Look it up.
New York Times bestseller, and I believe Iger's book has gone that way now as well.
Sure.
It's definitely one of the top purchased books right now, so get on it.
It's not that it's easy to get on the New York bestseller list, but there are publishers usually have strategies in play to guarantee that happens.
Yeah, of course.
So it's not that it's not impressive, but so many people can get on the bestseller list, and it doesn't say number. Some people may be number 1, it may be number 4, whatever. Regardless, I'm talking around in circles. But
he's the CEO of Disney. Of course, it's gonna be a bestseller
because people wanted the mother effing tea. That's a meme, and it's so I'm told. Mm-hmm. But I'm dabbing right now.
Oh god. Okay. Let's move on from that and let's talk about the real tea from this past week.
Can I keep dabbing?
Oh no, please don't. Okay, thank you.
All right, I stop.
He dabs everywhere in public, you guys. I'm just afraid to just go out anywhere.
I can't post half of the pictures that we take because I'm dabbing in most of them.
He really is.
I wish that was a joke.
Yeah.
Or no, she wishes that's a joke. Dabbing is life.
So the Skyliner wasn't even open for a week. On the 6th day of its operation, there was a malfunction. Now, it's really interesting to see how Disney has acknowledged the incident. First, they were saying that nothing was wrong and that there was no accident, when obviously everybody that was stuck in the cabins throughout the ride system were posting to social media and proving, oh no, there was definitely something wrong and they were stuck. And these guests were stuck for a little over 3 hours. Were advised, okay, open up your emergency kits. Please keep in mind, these gondolas don't have any air conditioning. There are no fans. And this is Florida. It is horrendously hot. Mark and I have talked about this extensively while we've been living here and on this podcast. It can be miserable. Now, thankfully, it was in the evening, so it was a little bit cooler. But if this had happened during the daytime, this would have been a major health crisis for every single person in those cabins. 3 people did have to go to the hospital as a result of this. They've all been released. So it seems that nobody was very seriously injured. What happened, we're still trying to get full clarity on it, but what it sounds to be is that there was a specific cabin /gondola/bucket, whatever you want to call it. It did not move. It did not go into leaving the station. So it created a backup, and guess what? One gondola hit the stopped gondola. There was a crash. There was shattered glass. Thankfully, nobody was actually in these gondolas, so no one was in those specific ride cabins for the impact.
Yeah.
And in terms of any sort of extreme evacuation, there was really only one gondola that had a really big evacuation, and then all of the other buckets eventually were able to be moved a little bit and much closer to the ground, so it was easier to get guests out.
So in terms of this specific situation, in terms of the crash, the crash only, this was the best possible situation that it could have been.
Absolutely.
There was a stoppage that created the delay that caused the stranding, but it's not like it kept the gondolas coming and it was just boom, boom, boom.
Right. They were able to stop it. Basically, they had to stop the entire line to get the stuck gondola off. Get all of the problem gondolas out of the way because there was the crash, so that they could keep things moving. But that took a while. The fire department had to be called in for assistance. If you're not familiar with Disney's system out here in Disney World, they essentially own an entire city. It's called Reedy Creek.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So Disney actually does have their own fire department. They still had to call the surrounding fire departments throughout the rest of Orange County, etc., for some backup. Apparently, these, or at least multiple fire stations, the force, the officers, they had kind of expressed concern over this ride system ahead of time. They were kind of concerned that something like this was going to happen.
This isn't the first time Disney used this ride system. Very famously, there were the Skyway buckets that were both at Disneyland and Disney World.
Correct. And both kind of ran without much, if any, incidents for their entire run.
I would say from Disney's operations, there were a lot of dumb people that played with fate.
Just a couple of dumb people.
Yeah, but that wasn't necessarily...
One dumb person, I should say.
That wasn't Disney's fault. From an operations standpoint, it was pretty successful.
So, in the mid-90s, there was a guest at Disneyland who decided to take the Skyway buckets, and he claimed at the time in his lawsuit that he, quote-unquote, fell out of the bucket. He landed in a tree next to Alice in Wonderland, and he was helped down by paramedics. He suffered, neck, etc. issues. And at the time, he brought his lawsuit to Disney for like $25,000, which today sounds small, obviously. Adjusted for inflation, it would be significantly larger. But granted, these buckets had gaps easy enough for people to get out of, right? And there are certain regulations in place by OSHA that can be sidestepped due to grandfathering clauses, because these rides are so old. As long as they haven't been changed in any way or been closed for an extended period of time, they don't have to meet certain regulations. And the Skyway was one of these things. However, it eventually came out, the guy admitted that he had voluntarily jumped out of the bucket. Don't really know why. That was never very clear. I think it was an easy cash grab.
Gotta get that Disney money.
Or maybe drugs were involved. Who knows?
There's a caterpillar down there. I gotta get in there.
Oh my gosh. Ooh. You know what? That might actually be the thing with the little shoes for the caterpillar.
What's a caterpillar?
Because if you haven't been to Disneyland, at the Alice in Wonderland dark ride attraction, there are these really cute little caterpillar shoes sitting on top of a giant mushroom, and reminiscent of the film where the caterpillar just disappears because he's turned into a butterfly. The shoes are just left there. Maybe in a tripped out state, he was like, ooh, I want those little shoes.
Those shoes probably look cute on me.
They so cute.
Jeez.
The Skyway was really cool. It created movement. It went between Tomorrowland and Fantasyland. Back at the time when there were ticket booths still in use, one way cost a D ticket, and you had to use 2 D tickets if you wanted to go the full route.
That makes sense. And that's not bad.
Really not bad.
And also, D-ticket denotes popularity.
Yes, absolutely. And they were never unpopular. However, a couple of months after this incident happened, Disney decided that they were going to close the attraction. They stated that they were going to be using... that they would quote-unquote be replacing the attraction with something. Obviously not. If you're going to be replacing it, it needs to be taking its actual place. Nothing went into that space, and also just due to the nature of the ride, that would be kind of challenging to do. No resources were taken from the ride to be placed elsewhere in the park. The real reason was that there were significant wear and tear on the structures and the support beams, etc., including as a part of the Matterhorn, which was kind of like the real wow for Disneyland Skyway. You got to go through the Matterhorn mountain, and that was just kind of a really cool visual feature. But they would have had to do extensive repairs, and it was just going to be way too costly, and it wasn't like it was a ride that had high capacity or whatever.
That's always been a big thing. Or rather, getting into that time frame of Disney, it was how many people can we get on this ride and how frequently? How we need to cycle people through so that we can raise attendance numbers and raise prices and blah, 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 blah.
And around that time, what Disney did a lot at the theme parks, unfortunately, was they would close something that was getting a little long in the tooth. Instead of maintaining it or updating it, they would just close it. They might replace it with something brand new, or they would just let it sit abandoned. And the Fantasyland chalet portion did sit there for a long time and didn't actually get demoed until 2016 when they were building Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah, no, I mean, people were surprised to still see that thing back there, but all you had to do, I mean, they essentially just covered it with carts, but you just had to give a quick of your neck and the whole station is still there, just probably covered in overgrowth. Yeah,
the trees just kept growing and growing, and it got really wild back there, and there was some backstage area that was a part of that. At one point, they did talk about potentially opening up a restaurant or a little Swiss hot chocolate shop in the area, but it never came to fruition. Part of what would have made that difficult is because just getting up there would have had to create a lot of new infrastructure for travel to be ADA compliant, which would have been hard. And in terms of Walt Disney World, they also got their own Skyway buckets. They lasted a little bit longer until 1999. Interestingly enough, and unfortunately, a couple of months before the attraction did close, there was a maintenance worker who was kind of cleaning the area around the buckets. And the cast members didn't know that he was there sweeping.
And they ran it.
And he tried to climb up.
Poor soul. Goodness me.
Yeah. It reopened not too long after the incident, after everything had been checked. Obviously, it was an error. Very, very sad that man lost his life. But similar to Disneyland's story. Well, this is getting expensive to maintain. Let's just rip it out.
Cut the losses, man. That's not a terrible idea. Excuse me.
And in terms of cleaning up the remnants, Space Mountain had a big refurb where they removed it. It was kind of, the Tomorrowland station was around the Autopia Speedway Raceway. I think there's a different name for it here.
Tomorrowland Speedway.
I'm still assimilating, guys.
I'm
trying. And then over in Fantasyland, that was kind of a stroller parking area for a while, and then it became the very famous Tangled restrooms, the prettiest potties to ever grace the Magic Kingdom.
We need to do prettiest potties with something that's funny. So I mean, 20 years later, getting this new system that I want to talk about it in a second, but I want to take the time to thank everybody who's been listening. If you are listening through iTunes, we would really appreciate it if you left us a review. That gets more eyes on the show. So help us out. Give us a little bit of a review, and we'd really appreciate it, and we'll read them on the show. Also, wanted to take the opportunity to thank our friends over at Nerd Mountain Shop. They're a shop that has a lot of Disney parks and nerd. You know, it's in the arena of Disney parks. There's some Harry Potter stuff. There's some Marvel stuff, and they recently did a design for us that you can see over at Dreamfinder and Figment Restoration Society. I absolutely adore it, and I know you do too.
Yes, I do. And it's really fantastic.
Yeah, Cassie is a wonderful designer. She does the designing over at nerdmountainshop.com. That's nerdmountainshop.com. They're also on Instagram. If you want to sort of keep an eye on their releases or any of their particular stuff, follow them on Instagram, because they post fairly frequently and you get an idea of what sort of stuff that they offer. And we're talking to them about them hosting that Dreamfinder, the Daffers logo, as we're calling it, because it's really cool.
It's really, really cool. Any Rainbow Tunnel fans, you're going to absolutely love this design.
And for that matter, head on over to Dreamfinder and Figment Restoration Society.wordpress.com.
Yes.
And check out our mission statement. Check out Andrea's mission statement. I'm helping in a couple of ways, but she's done the majority of the work, so I don't want to take any credit. It's all her. It's all you.
Thank you, honey.
And I'll help any way I can. But it's a way to write to Disney as a way to keep bring Dreamfinder back and keep Figment at Epcot.
Yes, that is the ultimate goal. And if you've already written your letters and visited the website, I thank you very much for your participation and support. If you haven't heard, there has been a upcoming shakeup in management. There's some new presidents getting moved around for certain positions. So Walt Disney World Resort is actually going to have Josh D'Amaro coming back to Walt Disney World. He used to be in charge of Animal Kingdom before he went over to Disneyland Resort. Now he is coming back to the East Coast, which I think is really, really great. I think that he is going to have a good understanding and be nostalgic for Walt Disney World and really bring the entire resort into celebration mode for the 50th anniversary. And I think that he may be someone that would support this. But as of right now, he wasn't the president. So we're going to be updating the mailing list to add him in there. I don't want to flood the poor man in his inbox the moment he comes over here.
Flood him.
But he's going to get added. So keep an eye out for that.
And also tell your friends, if you are parks fans, I know we're talking a lot about Walt Disney World. That's kind of our world right now, so to speak. Yeah. That wasn't pun not intended. You will know when you will know when I intend a pun. But make sure to share the show with a friend. Have them follow us on Twitter. And this isn't the end of the show. This is sort of like the midway. Yeah. But I just wanted to make sure that I got all this stuff in, not at the very end. But
He gets so mad at himself when he forgets.
I always do. I used to do it at the other studio too. But unless they handed me a piece of paper saying "do this," it happens. It's part of radio. But we before the big accident, we got a chance to experience the sky buckets.
Yeah,
and it was great.
It was a lot of fun.
I mean, except for the one, there's a long leg where they sort of fill the bucket with as many people comfortably as they can. We topped off at 6 people, 2 being kids and a stroller.
It was tight.
It was a little tight,
and the stroller was it really up in our face.
And a loud family, but it's part of the thing.
Loud family that was separate from the small children I found to be much more obnoxious and grating. But
I mean, we got a chance to experience that. We went back and forth. We went to Hollywood. We stopped off at Galaxy's Edge, grabbed some Ronto wraps, headed back to Epcot. And
we had the Coruscant cooler, which you can pick up when you get a Ronto wrap, and it's really good, you guys. It's my favorite mixed drink in the land so far.
It's a vermouth based, so it's dry, but it's a little sweet. It's interesting. It definitely there's a lot of mixed drinks at Galaxy's Edge.
There's whiskey in it. It's good. You want it? Try it.
But the shortest,
if you're of age.
The shortest leg of the journey being Hollywood to the Riviera,
yes.
Right? Where it splits off to Pop Century and the other one, and the rest, and the ending in Epcot.
Yeah.
Either way, so that leg, the shortest leg, you essentially get your own. You don't have to ride with a big group because it's not that long of a ride, and that's the most enjoyable. The only thing that I wished for to sort of plus the experience is if on takeoff they gave us a little something. It doesn't necessarily have to be like I would love a musical score, like I was telling you, either You Can Fly or that new song from Mary Poppins that ends the picture, the new finale where they all end up flying on a balloon, or one of Disney's many flight songs that they have, or even just like a little sting, like a little score sting, or even Hang On Everybody,
Tinkerbell, Pixie Dust,
something, it's like give me a little bit of that Disney magic. That's what I'm saying. But we don't get that. It's still a thrilling, exhilarating takeoff. But aside, like being able to ride by ourselves was, I think, the highlight and the best part.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I can't remember riding the Skyway buckets back at Disneyland as a kid. I did do it. My mother actually took a really cute picture of me when I was maybe a couple of years old, and I had my own little Disney name tag with my name on it, proudly displayed, and that was rad. I remember seeing them going around, though. It just, that visual movement is very, I don't know. There's just something about it. There's something that makes you feel hopeful looking to the sky like that, seeing people going to and from, just kind of having that hope of what the future can be for transportation, having more community, etc.
I mean, if you're with the right people.
Gosh, yeah. And getting cramped with that first group was kind of rough. I will say that while we were moving, the heat didn't really bother me at all, but I can imagine getting stopped and delayed for an extended period of time would be challenging. And I wanted to wait to have any sort of qualms or issues and have that expressed until I actually experienced it for myself. So yeah, when it's moving, you don't need it. Then you're fine. But for what happened this past Saturday, I mean, those poor people really needed some air. They needed something cool.
Yeah.
They had to, drink their little mini emergency water rations. Some people had
very slowly.
Ugh. There were people that needed to go to the bathroom, and they did have little cups in there. I don't know if they actually used them or not.
I don't think anybody's going to be public about reviewing that situation.
You know what? In today's day and age with social media, I think people would be more open to talking about it.
Reaction
Not everybody.
video. You have somebody that's watching the thing happen, and they're going, "Ooh, that doesn't look very comfortable."
Just the sound effect.
Yeah.
While they're facially reacting to it.
Yeah.
Now, that'd be funny.
No, thank you.
And disgusting.
Very gross.
But if you happen to get trapped on one of the Skyliner buckets on the Saturday incident, please share your experience with us.
Yeah, go to anchor.fm. You can leave us a voice message. We'd love to hear from you.
All the silliness or horrors that you experienced, we will welcome it with open arms.
Yeah. It's one of those situations that you never want to happen to anybody, let alone you. However, it's one of those growing pains that you never wish has to happen, but now that it has happened, the experience is going to grow and change. They're not going to tear it down and start over, but they're going to figure out ways to make that experience better if it ever happens again.
So the interesting thing about all of this is that they could have had air conditioning units or fans installed in these gondolas from the beginning. This was not a transportation design that Disney came up with themselves. They actually had an outside business create it for them, and there was an option to put that stuff in there, and they decided to be cheap. I'm just gonna say it. They decided to be cheap, and they didn't put it in there. And as a result, with the incident that happened on Saturday, to placate people that were very upset from their experience, they gave them like $100
$200 Disney gift card and a 4-day stay.
2 or 4-day park hopper passes. I guess it depended on
they were dealing
their
with
situations.
They were dealing with each gondola on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
And so like they weren't going to do a wide swath because everybody had a different experience, but one person in particular was that the first one that I saw was $200 Disney gift card and 4-day park hopper for Disney World.
It's interesting just seeing the dynamics of what people negotiated for.
And it's really unfortunate because it is a great way of transportation. Yeah. It felt a lot less clunky than, and I guess we'll transition in if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
It felt a lot less clunky than, it was the most enjoyable way to travel from park to park. Like, we didn't have to get in our car. We didn't have to wait for a bus. We didn't have to wait for a tram, for a monorail, or this or that. Or a boat. And I mean, at least for that one leg. And I imagine for bigger families, being able to have your own gondola the entire way, it's super enjoyable. Now, we only had it for the shortest leg, but that was really enjoyable. And you really got a chance to connect. And I'm sure there are going to be plenty of situations where you're in there with somebody that's not a part of your party, and you all get to enjoy it together. We weren't so lucky this first time, and who knows when our luck will change depending on when it opens up. But I legitimately feel that the Skyliner was the best way to at least get from Epcot to Hollywood Studios and vice versa.
I really like that they chose a system that could create nostalgia for attractions that they've had in the past, which I thought was really cool. I still feel in my heart of hearts that what they really should have done was use that money to invest more in Disney's monorail system.
Definitely agreed.
The monorails are getting pretty old. The first set of cabins, they lasted for about 20 years before they were replaced, and now we're on 30 years for this set. All of the cabins smell like an old Apple store where there is just way too much BO funk that has seeped into the inside of these, into the carpeting, into I don't know what. It's definitely not a single person that walks in there. It is a smell that you cannot get out of there. And every time we go in, it grosses me out.
So in Epcot, there's like, in some of the buildings, there's like a musk.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not, but I'm saying it in a good way. There's a thing where it's like, oh yeah, this is from like the 80s. This smell, this is an older smell.
Yeah.
This smells like Grandpapa's house or something. And then you get on a monorail and you're like, this is Grandpapa's bathroom.
Oh, it's so nasty.
I mean, to put it in perspective to folks who have brand new monorail cars in California, there you go. But one of the main differences that you can tell is that they haven't really updated the spiel in a really long time, and it's something.
Actually, they just started putting new spiels into the different monorails.
Thank God.
So much so that they're actually giving tidbits on new things that are going to be coming to Epcot, and other places.
But one of the main things, speaking of Nerd Mountain Shop, Cassie and Will were both had mentioned that it says parents or adults take children by the hand. Not specifically your children, just children. You just grab one and take it. Whereas on the gondolas, it's kids. Make sure to hold your parents' hands or something along that way, where it's the impetus on the kids and it specifically mentions their parents, as opposed to like,
which is really cute.
Go nuts and grabbing kids. Like that's one of the things that definitely needs to change. I probably could have said that better.
But spiel is also on Spaceship Earth. I don't know if you've noticed.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, no, because every time we get off Spaceship Earth, I say your children.
He
your
shouts
children
it.
by
I
the
get
hand.
really embarrassed and I want to just.
I say it while I'm dabbing. Your children.
I can't. Oh.
I would live stream it, but the reception in there is really bad.
Yeah.
I would
which is
live stream on Twitch. Live stream on Twitch, dabbing, saying your children. But so, do you think the Skyliner is? I mean, did you think the Skyliner was the best mode of transport?
I found it to be the most. I found it to be the most fun and definitely the freshest of all of the different various transportation systems that we've been using, but it's also literally brand new. And just looking inside of the cabin, I'm like, oh man, people are going to start like sticking gum underneath the seats and no one's going to check for that. I mean, I don't want to be the negative Nancy, of course, but just thinking about all of these different logistics and what the system is like. You know, you have something like the buses. People can actually take it offline and really take a look to check for cleanliness and update it. Like, we're getting these new character wraps on some of the different buses, for example. And Monorail has gotten some visual upgrades, not really. They need to fumigate those things, you guys. Like, I can't get over this.
Well, no,
but
it's a distraction.
It is. It 100% is. And the thing is, like, the monorail is so intrinsically Disney. And I feel that they really need to be really taking care of these things. And there have been really bad accidents with the monorail itself as well, which I'm not going to get into. But I do feel, and they don't have any air conditioning, by the way, and Disneyland visitors also experience this too. Yeah, it gets a bit stuffy and hot in there. And if there is a breakdown, the entire cabin has to be dragged along the line, which isn't easy. But again, it doesn't take as long as what happened with the Skyliner. 3 hours.
Well, that's the problem is
being high up in the air like that and being potentially alone. If someone had a nervous breakdown in there, I can just, that just is bad. It's real bad.
So luckily, it's very difficult to get out.
Which I thought about as well.
And I say that with all seriousness,
Yeah.
not as a joke. It's very difficult to get out of those. And while yes, there is the chance for a nervous breakdown. There is air. It is flowing, and as somebody who has experienced varying degrees of anxiety attack, that ticks some of the boxes. While I don't necessarily like height, it's not as troubling. I can't speak to that. I'll say for me, being up that high isn't as troubling. And while we did stop a little bit, the checkpoints on some of the lines are so close as such to where, again, just speaking from me and from experience, it wasn't that bad for somebody who isn't deathly afraid of heights, but somebody, if I'm not in the right mindset, I'm not a fan. But even so, like, I trust Disney enough that I don't think there is a possible way for those buckets to fall out of the sky.
Oh, I don't believe so either. As long as they take care of it and maintain it and don't.
I think there's a permanent failsafe that if any gondola gets to a particular point, they take it off. That's it. You're done. We got to get a new one, or we're short one, or whatever. Time to rotate you out. Fix this. Boom. Bing. Bang. Boom.
The other thing you got to think about too, with just being prepared for worst case scenario, if there's a lightning storm and you get stuck there for several hours, it's not like anyone can safely go out to retrieve you.
Not necessarily. I don't think that's entirely the case. I don't think they would have
You're
that.
over several bodies of water, though, because there's a lot of water that the Skyliner buckets travel over. That's not great.
There's water services, not necessarily Coast Guard, one per episode. There's not necessarily, they would not have this service without plans in place. So that's the thing is that they can't, especially in today's day and age. We were talking about OSHA earlier. They cannot open this unless there is a plan for everything.
Oh, they have a plan for everything.
Oh, and
I just don't know if it's...
I don't know it.
No.
And I'm sure they don't want to talk about it.
Well, no, and I mean, I don't expect them to, and I'm glad, obviously, so the attraction is still closed right now. They are not reopening it, or at least we don't know when they're going to. They're thoroughly investigating what went wrong.
They're running it without people.
Yeah.
Or they not necessarily daily, but they have run it since
they have
then,
to.
Just to make sure, just to check certain things.
Right.
And there are people, there was somebody taking a picture of, they saw, there's one there with its door open. It's like, yeah, because the people got evacuated and they moved on. They're not going to, all right, let's close these doors after. Like, no, let's make sure that these people are okay and move on to the next group. And so there's a lot of negativity with a story like this. And I'm not saying that there is a positive spin on it, but you can't. People's lives are at stake.
People are using this entire incident to try to make themselves famous. And I mean, I guess the argument could be made, because we're talking about it for this episode, that we're trying to do that too. Though I'm not going to come out here with a 2-sentence hot take on this entire thing.
Here's the mother flippin' tea.
As so many people have been doing on social media, it's really unfortunate. People went to the hospital for this. People were stranded. Don't make this your 15, 20 minutes of fame, okay? Like, be respectful. Disney is looking into it. Even though I've been kind of more alarmist talking about all of this, I do trust Disney to be as thoroughly exhaustive of making sure that this is as safe as possible before they start doing it again. Do I think that they tried to take a couple of shortcuts to get this done? Absolutely. But I don't think that they have put something forward that was just inherently going to be dangerous.
I don't think those shortcuts were in safety. They cannot be in regards to safety.
The air.
Yeah, that's really, I think that's the biggest sticking point. And I think that maybe they'll add fans.
Yeah.
You know, if they know it, I think they know it's a problem because at the station they have all of these stationary
Yes,
fans.
they're giant fans.
That pour air as much as they can, though there are sections where you don't get any.
They have to have it for the cast members, though, because otherwise they would be dealing with all sorts of lawsuits.
But
workplace environment.
I want to inherently express that I think once all of the issues are hammered out, that this is going to be very successful. This is going to go back to being very successful.
Yeah.
And I personally would like to see it expand. This same type of transportation, but a different line. You know, this is the red line, and then the green line somehow connects Animal Kingdom to Magic Kingdom, the Kingdom line.
Animal Kingdom is what really needs an additional connection, because right now you use the bus or nothing at all, or you
car.
drive with your own vehicle.
You could take a giraffe, but that's frowned upon.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
It's frowned upon. I'm not saying don't do it, but people will openly frown at you.
So our next trip, we're gonna go to the lodge.
I don't want to hurt the thing. You'll be fine, but I will destroy it on accident.
That's true. I'll make friends with the giraffe, and well, you might not see me again.
I just have to go on the safari. Like
we'll take off into the sunset.
It can't go far. You're still gonna be on Disney property, and
it'll be the best place.
And there's the pod of giraffes. And who's that? But agreed. The Animal Kingdom needs some more transportation, and I think the bucket could be an additional way to get some eyes on particular parts of the park. Maybe like some of the backstage areas are things that they want to avoid.
And that's my one real criticism with the Skyliner, is that we're seeing a lot of unfortunate backstage areas. And you know what? Some people love that. And I mean, I like to see some of the goings on, but most of this stuff ain't pretty, you guys. And I'm not expecting Disney to try to beautify all of these backstage areas either. What I found really exciting about the Skyway back in the day was you got a bird's eye view of Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom, and that was really magical.
Well, I would like to see stuff sort of like Living with the Land, where there's the Mickey or thing here, or the this or that, where it's just like, oh, that's cute, and that's
they had
really
that Ratatouille banner up, which was really nice.
And I'm sure that wasn't just for the Skyway. You know, I'm sure that there's
Where could you see it anywhere else though? It's literally right after you leave the Epcot station, and it's on the back of the France Pavilion.
But can you see it from the friendships? I think there might. I think you could probably see it.
Too high.
You might be able to see it from some hotels. Like
maybe
there are probably some other sightlines, because that didn't look too new of a sign to me.
Mm-hmm.
But all of the colors on that sign are pretty, not drab, but faded. They're not pastel. They're not necessarily the most vivid things, so you can't really tell.
I mean, Remy is a rat after all. Like,
but he's a blue rat, so he fits.
He's a gray rat.
Gray.
Are we gonna get into like Brindle and stuff, like with dogs?
Brindle.
Oh, I've taught you a new word.
I mean,
we have so much more to discuss.
Hong Kong Goose. I mean, if that's not a way to end the show, I don't know what is. Do you have a favorite? What would you say is your favorite mode of transportation at Walt Disney World?
The monorail.
Still, even with its limited, because I think it does what the Sky Buckets can't necessarily do, which is provide a cool visual integration into the parks, because they're all outside. So it's not like you look at the skyline in the park and it's, oh, hey, cool, Sky Buckets are integrated in some way, similarly to like how they would go through the Matterhorn. But I like the
path is inspired, that and the history behind the monorails, why they were built, what they did for public transportation and what that said about future innovation in those ways has a huge impact. And I mean, yeah, I love some of these old school Disney things, and I'm not going to change in that way. And I mean, in certain ways, the Skyliner plays into that. But for me, there is nothing cooler than seeing the monorails go around the Matterhorn or go around the entrance to Epcot. You know,
So-
there are all of these visuals that just, because that's what it's supposed to be, right? It's literally taking you on a higher elevated journey, seeing all of the amazing stuff. And instead, the Skyliner is taking you around these corners. The Skyliner focuses more on just the efficiency of transportation, but it's not celebrating what it's around. It's not really highlighting that. You get to see a little bit of the highlights for the Caribbean Beach Resort, for example, and the Riviera, which is cool. But for me, it's all about the theme parks. That's why I want to ride these things. I want to check out Spaceship Earth from a higher elevation. I get to go on the Epcot monorail line. Even if it stinks of BO inside, I still want to do it,
and
which is weird.
Grandpapa. But I agree. I wish that the Hollywood landing was a little bit more scenic. I mean, this is nitpicky and first world problem me as all heck. But even with
Going to theme parks in general, first world problems.
Sure, but going to the Epcot, you're still going into right outside, but you're in the thick of it. You still see bits of Paris, you see bits of the UK, and you see what lies ahead. You can still see Future World pretty well, and you can see the skyline of the World Showcase. But with Hollywood, you see the backside of rocks, Hollywood Tower Hotel in a parking lot. How Californian can you get?
Well, you got me there. I'm speechless.
Let us know what your favorite form of Walt Disney World travel is. If you've ridden on the Sky Buckets, if you did the accident change your opinion of the Sky Buckets? If you were looking forward to going them on a visit, let us know. You can find us on Twitter.
I think the lines are going to be longer. Honestly, sorry for interrupting you,
but follow us on Twitter at Party of 2Pod. Let us know, and you can follow us also individually at our own personal accounts.
You can find me at Dole Whip Drea on Instagram and on Twitter.
And you can find me at Mark B. Donica. I tweet right now. It's Goose Game. Pro wrestling, some park stuff, and who knows what else. I'm on Instagram too. My stories are kind of weird, but on Wednesdays they could be pretty fun. They could be pretty cool.
I'm in the thick of Dis Twitter, so you'll find me there.
No, you're my reference. You're like I'm your anchor point, so that you can like breathe every now and again, and then I'm like, oh, what's going on? Cool. And then you're like, put me back in, and then
it's a terrible void.
But
I love it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Party of Two podcast. We will see you on the next ride.